This morning, thousands of migrant children are temporarily being housed around the state, with many more still coming across the border. As leaders debate whether this is a challenge or a full-blown crisis, what should the Biden administration do next? Congressman Al Green is joining us from Washington. Also, in the last legislative session, Texas dedicated millions of dollars to test a huge backlog of rape kits. State Representative Victoria Neave is here with a progress report today and to tell us about the new sweeping bipartisan bills to further prioritize survivors of sexual assault. Plus, the brand new chairman of the Public Utility Commission resigns after a bombshell report of a phone call where out-of-state investors were assured that their windfall profits from last month's electricity failure would be protected. Should Texans trust that the state is looking out for them? We'll ask Senator Paul Bettencourt. And have we reached the point where more Texans have been vaccinated against COVID-19 than have been infected by it? A fresh look at the numbers with the Texas Tribune's Ross Ramsey.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
And good Sunday morning. I'm Jason Wheeler in for Jason Whiteley this week. We want to start off with the top political headlines going on across Texas. 3 Texas Republicans voted against a bill to award a Congressional Gold Medal to Capitol Police for their efforts to protect members of both chambers during the January 6th insurrection. U.S. Reps Michael Cloud of Victoria, Louis Gohmert of Tyler, and Lance Gooden of Terrell all voted no. That bipartisan resolution passed without them, though, 413 to 12. Gohmert and Cloud disagreed with some of the language. Last week, Governor Abbott announced plans for a controversial new bill to take on voter fraud in Texas. We need to note here there hasn't been any evidence of widespread voter fraud here or in any other state, but the governor cited Harris County's use of drive-through centers and extended vote by mail during the 2020 election as problematic. Democrats accuse Abbott, though, of stoking fear among voters and say the proposals are about holding on to power by suppressing future turnout. Well, in less than 3 hours, state senators filed and passed a bill that would reverse billions of dollars in overcharges to electric companies during last month's winter storm. A watchdog group says that ERCOT, the state's electric grid operator, overbilled companies by $16 billion by allowing wholesale electricity prices to stay at maximum levels for too long. The House didn't take action on that bill, though, so the lieutenant governor has asked the governor to intervene. All right, we want to begin this morning with migrant teenagers being temporarily housed in cities across Texas. Hundreds are now being cared for in Midland and in North Texas, with many more still coming across the border. Now, the numbers may be bigger this time, but we have seen similar surges in recent years, and now, just like then, the situation has become politically charged. Many are asking what the Biden administration should do. Congressman Al Green is joining us from Washington with some ideas on that. Representative Green is a Democrat. His district includes most of southwestern Houston, part of Fort Bend County, and most of Missouri City.
Thanks for being with us today, Representative Green, to talk about this. Here we are. We got a new administration, the Biden administration. It has been reluctant to call this a crisis. Is this a crisis, number one? And is the administration doing enough, quickly enough for these young people?
You set standards for yourself when you set standards for others. And we did talk about a number of standards that we wanted to see at the border. And I still want to see those standards regardless as to who it is as president of the United States. I don't think the standards should change because the presidency is occupied by one party or another. So with this said, with reference to what's happening at the border currently, there's a debate going on as to whether or not there is a crisis or whether there's a challenge at the border. I see both a crisis and a challenge. The challenge, obviously, is that of trying to do what we can to help, in some circumstances, babies to have an opportunity to be placed with someone who's going to be responsible and who's going to take care of them. The crisis is something that emanates from years of ignoring the needs. in these countries that are south of the border. This president has said that he needs $4 billion to get to the root cause of these problems. I think he probably needs more than $4 billion, to be quite candid. I've been to El Salvador. I've seen what it's like there. But if it's $4 billion, I would support that so that we can get to the root cause, because building walls will not solve the problems of our neighbors to the south.
Do you think that there is an appetite in this country to spend that money, though, elsewhere? It always becomes politicized.
Well, it does, and that's unfortunate. Wearing a mask has become politicized. We have many things that are politicized that actually should be done in our best interest. My hope is that it won't be politicized. My hope is that we can have compromise, and I will work hard to achieve compromise. But if only one side compromises, it's not true compromise, it's capitulation. I don't think that either side should have to capitulate. I think we have to move toward each other as opposed to create a chasm between us. So my hope is that we can find compromise and that we can do this because it's in our best interest to do this. If we don't get to the root cause, the people are not going to stop coming. The walls won't stop them. It won't help us to do this.
There is a feeling among Republicans that perhaps this could expose a weakness as they in the Biden administration as they go forward into the 2022 midterms here. They say the president's early signals of changing the Trump era immigration stance brought on this wave of arrivals. But you said, no, this problem has actually been festering long before that.
This president has showed humanity and decency for children. I would say to my colleagues on the other side that the Good Samaritan, when he saw a person in harm's way, the Good Samaritan did not say, what's going to happen to me if I help this person who needs help? The Good Samaritan said, what will happen to him if I don't help? So we've got to ask ourselves, what will happen to these children if we don't give them some aid and assistance that have made it to our country and are seeking asylum?
What do you think is the thing that President Biden needs to do that hasn't been done so far? What should be at the top of the to-do list at this point to get this under control? At
the very top of my to-do list is to get immigration reform passed, and let's get that $4 billion, and let's get that money moving toward our neighbors to the south so that we can get to the root cause of this problem. But comprehensive immigration reform is the way to resolve this, because in so doing, we'll get to some of the issues that my colleagues across the aisle would have us consider, and some of the issues that we would consider on my side of the aisle.
Congressman Al Green from the Houston area, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, sir.
Governor Abbott is talking about immigration now, blaming President Biden for the current surge in arrivals at the border, even linking the issue to the pandemic, saying that migrant teens are bringing COVID-19 to Texas. Now, this is a pivot from just a few weeks ago when the governor was laser focused on last month's power outages, which left 57 people dead. To talk more about this shift in the governor's focus, we head to Austin to ask Ross Ramsey. Ross is with the Texas Tribune. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for being with us today again. Some of the governor's critics have been alleging that this shift to immigration and the needling of the Biden administration about the wave of migrants is to distract from the power grid failure and the state's slower rollout on vaccinations. What's your thought on that?
Well, it does do that. You know, there is a legitimate area of concern here. There's a surge at the border. There is a lot of concern about human trafficking. The governor pulled in COVID in this and started referring to the immigrants as possible people communicating the disease, which adds a weird twist to this. But it does change the subject from the freeze.
Saw a refreshing headline on your site there that more Texans by percentages have been vaccinated against COVID-19 than have been infected by it. That is a bright spot.
We're starting to get some really good signs. You know, more people have received the vaccination. We're still getting to second shots and all of those kinds of things, but, you know, the balance is shifting.
All right, hang with us, Ross, for the Reporters Roundtable in just a bit. We'll be right back. In the last legislative session, lawmakers dedicated millions of dollars to test a huge backlog of rape kits in this state. This session, State Representative Victoria Neave is touting new bipartisan bills to further prioritize survivors of sexual assault. And she is here with us this morning to give us a progress report. Representative Neave represents District 107, which includes parts of East Dallas, Mesquite, and South Garland in Dallas County.
Representative Neave, thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate your time. So has the situation with the backlog on testing those, has that gotten better since the last time around?
We have seen an 80% reduction in the backlog, and law enforcement, including our local law enforcement in Dallas PD and others, are getting the DNA evidence back much faster, normally in 90 days, than where before sometimes it would take up to 4 years or more years to get the DNA evidence.
Wow, so an 80% reduction in the testing of that rape kit backlog, that is tremendous. What is the real effect of that to actually be getting through that backlog like that?
The real effect is that every rape kit represents a story, a survivor, somebody who has gone through this really traumatic experience. They are closer to getting justice, to getting closure on their cases. It translates into getting repeat offenders, and the DNA that is being uploaded to the CODIS system is making an impact and connecting with cases all across the country, so not just here in Texas. So that evidence is real, it's significant, and it's meaningful for Texas women, children, and men survivors of domestic or sexual assault.
Now, of course, the work is never complete. This time around, there are efforts to get more funding to continue that progress. Also, we're seeing some legislation focusing on some really fundamental things here, like the definition of sexual assault and the time period that someone can report sexual harassment. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that are moving their way through right now.
Yes, we want to continue to build upon the legacy of the Lavinia Masters Act, and we know that sexual assaults have not ceased. Including during the pandemic, we saw a significant increase also in domestic violence, which is one of the other issues that we're trying to tackle. There's sexual harassment in the workplace. One of those bills, or several of those bills in particular, we want to expand protective orders and the ability to obtain one for survivors of human trafficking as well. So we're taking an all-team approach to try to tackle these issues and just make sure that while we're also focusing on other issues with respect to the COVID pandemic, healthcare, education, that we also do not let these issues fall by the wayside.
And as you mentioned, some of these issues may have been exacerbated during this pandemic when so many people have been, sequestered at home, and we've had domestic issues that have arisen from that. And so there may be even more suffering that has occurred in these last 12 months than what we would normally see.
Yes, you're absolutely right. During the pandemic, there are studies that showed in the Dallas area, there was a significant increase in domestic violence incidents, and people couldn't leave their homes. And that happened in numerous parts across the state. So we want to give survivors, we want to give law enforcement and others the tools that they need. And we want to make sure that our family violence centers continue to get the resources that they need to be able to assist these families.
State Representative Victoria Neave from the Dallas area, thank you for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
And staying with the legislature now, Republicans are filing bills that they say will help prevent voter fraud in Texas. And there hasn't been any evidence of widespread voter fraud in Texas or any other state for that matter. This effort is similar to efforts that are being made by other GOP-led legislatures across the country. Now, many Democrats say that this is a blatant attempt at widespread voter suppression, but State Senator Paul Bettencourt says there is a need to strengthen election integrity. His Senate District 7 is located in Harris County and includes parts of Houston and Tomball.
Let's get right to the criticisms, because we've been hearing this a lot here and in other states. Basically, the way it lays out, Democrats say that Republicans are using the falsehood of widespread voter fraud as a cover to limit voter turnout in future elections because 2020 didn't go the GOP's way. What do you say to that?
Well, I say the facts are completely opposite to that, because 2020 went the GOP way in Texas. We had record turnout, highest level, and also the best percentages of turnout is in 30 years. So these criticisms aren't based in fact. Look, when I look at my Integrity 7 bills, which are voter or integrity bills, what do they do? Okay, well, let's get rid of the hyperbole and talk about what they do. I don't think people should be registered in 2-by-3-inch post office boxes. Okay, I've got nearly 5,000 people in Harris County registered in little PO boxes. They don't live there, so they shouldn't be able to be registered there. And when you look through these are common sense reforms, not some grandiose scheme to turn back what was a big successful election and turnout that was clearly obvious by the numbers.
But Senator, if these bills go forward with only Republican support, is there a concern that you'll have a big chunk of the electorate in Texas who feels like they don't have more voter confidence after these measures go through, that it was a partisan push?
Well, we haven't even had the bills to a committee debate, so I'm not going to assume this is going to be just a pure partisan vote. I think what we have to look at is what works and what doesn't work. And we have things we need to fix, and let's have that discussion about it. And I hope that will garner bipartisan support.
I want to shift gears here and talk about the winter storm blackouts now. A lot of Texans who were hit by days of electricity failures and then may have been hit by large electric bills were clamoring for accountability in these last weeks. But this week, the Texas Public Utility Commission chairman, who was just appointed by Governor Abbott earlier this month, resigned after Texas Monthly published audio and reported that he had held a 48-minute phone call with out-of-state investors who stood to profit from the storms, promising to keep their profits intact. Should that give Texans confidence that the priorities are in the right place?
Well, in that particular chairman's case, absolutely not. It's an abhorrent statement, and the governor asked him to resign. And he should have resigned before the governor even asked him, because that's a preposterously bad public policy statement for a regulator to make. I've listened to that tape, and it just, it literally would make my hair on fire if I could do it. I'm that mad about it, because it means that he already presupposed back almost, several weeks ago that he wasn't going to listen to the Senate, wasn't going to come in and tell the truth in the Senate hearings, had already made up his mind. And even though we tried to pass legislation that would get some repricing of what was an error by the outside market monitor, he obviously had already made up his mind he wasn't going to do it. So that's one resignation that is water on the bridge and good riddance as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, there's going to be some Texans not happy about that audio in that call. Will average, regular Joe Texans actually see any real reform or relief coming out of Austin with this particular situation?
And we're not even talking about winterization, a whole bunch of other factors. So we're going to get a lot done. That's my prediction, because it has to be done. It has to be done. We had it 10 years ago in North Texas, especially. And we did learn from it. Well, I wasn't there then, but I'm a quick learner, even if I'm just an Aggie senator, the only one in the state.
Senator Bettencourt, thank you for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
And we've got a lot more to come. Up next, our Reporters Roundtable. It is time now for our Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines into perspective. Ross is back with us from the Texas Tribune, and joining us each week, Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer at WFAA in Dallas. Thanks all for doing it with us again this week. This was a week when Texas government seemed to kind of fall apart. The lieutenant governor and Senate at odds with the governor and the House over utility overcharges. The question here is, was this political gamesmanship, or is there a genuine wedge that's developing here? Ross, let's start with you.
Well, I think the genuine wedge is that the Senate and the lieutenant governor are the only ones who want to do this repricing thing. Everybody else thinks it would mess up the markets. One senator described it as trying to unscramble eggs. But there's also plenty of politics here. The three top officials in state government are kind of banging each other around the head and shoulders, which I got to say is not unusual for this point in a legislative session.
And there's a huge amount of money here as well, so that just raises the stakes even further. Bud, what do you say about this?
Well, it's pretty clear, and the way the government works now, Governor Abbott is in charge of utility regulation, and he plans to keep it that way. if Governor Patrick has an idea for how utilities ought to be regulated, then he needs to pass it through the House and pass it through the legislature. But right now, the governor's going to keep his power. If there's going to be any political talk, I'm sure he'll remind everybody that Dan Patrick was the drag on the ticket, the poorest performing Republican. Greg Abbott, one of the best performing Republicans when they ran last cycle.
Interesting. So there is some political headbutting here. Bernadine, what's your take?
Oh, there's a lot of political headbutting because keep in mind, they're all up for election in 2022. So they're trying to not only satisfy their base, but show that they are trying to address what happened with the power outages. And something has to happen. And keep in mind now, Lieutenant Governor Patrick has promised that something is going to happen. So he's pushing hard to make that happen. And it's not to say that it won't. It's just that you have a lot of them, they're sort of jockeying around on the political sphere.
And then there's still a lot of question about will there be any relief for regular Texans out there? This is all about the money that has been charged to big electricity providers. People around this state still looking for some accountability for what happened when they lost power for days and days, and in some cases got a nasty bill on top of that.
Absolutely.
But Jason, I'll just point out one of the Dallas News editorial writer or columnist referred to the idea of the Senate as socialism, that it share the pain of the high electricity costs. That's the kind of word that'll be thrown into an election campaign.
As we say, though, there's going to be a lot more battling to be done over this because it involves politics and it involves a whole lot of zeros, some big money at stake in this one as they fight this one out. Thanks all of you for doing this with us, and thanks everyone at home for watching. We will see you right here next Sunday when Jason Whiteley will return to Inside Texas Politics. Stay healthy and have a great week ahead.